There was no team in the 2019-2020 NBA season more disappointing than the Philadelphia 76ers. There's nothing like going from the fifth most likely to win an NBA championship at the beginning of the season to getting swept in the first round. With Brett Brown already out the door, how long will it take the Philly front office to realize that further things should be shaken up as well? Well, apparently not very long. According to reports, a lot sooner than we think. Hola amigos, welcome to Takes and Fuego. Today we take a look at the blockbuster trade that would shake the NBA completely. The 76ers roster at this point, although talented, is just clunky when it's all put together. I still believe Horford is a decent player, but it is nearly impossible to play along with Embiid. I believe Ben Simmons is an elite prospect, but given his skill set and need to be around the rim, is just not good to play with Embiid. On one hand, you have Simmons, who is too unwilling to take the three-pointer, and on the other end, you have Embiid, who is probably too willing to take the three-pointer. So what can be done about this? Sometimes when there's smoke, there's fuego, and sometimes when there's smoke, there's just more smoke. But there's a lot of smoke on this one, and that includes Mike D'Antoni signing with the Philadelphia 76ers and sending James Harden to the 76ers and Joel Embiid to the Rockets. If we look at that Houston team, one thing was clearly missing from their roster when the Lakers ended up beating them. One that no one has really mentioned or talked about at all. Sorry to break news, but the fact is that they aren't playing centers, as apparently that is one of the biggest inefficiencies of the game, and maybe it is. You know what else is inefficient? Losing in the playoffs, a lot. But another inefficiency is relying on the three-point shot so heavily and not having a plan B when it's going in, like when they shot 26.5% in Game 5. Also, the fact is, although PJ Tucker did prove impressive, when the Lakers doubled the Rockets in rebounds, like in Game 4, it was still going to be a problem. Joel Embiid would solve both of these problems for the Houston Rockets, and with Mike D'Antoni gone, they may be going to think a completely new system and a completely new way of winning accordingly, which may not be a bad thing. Although the Rockets have been one of the favorites to win the title every year, it typically ends in disappointment. How many times does this need to be run back before we realize their current format isn't a real title contending way to play ball? When Joel is at his best, he's an absolute force, and when we saw him in an actually competitive series, like against Toronto in 2019, he was all over the place. He ruined entire offensive series for the Raptors and just had his way with Serge Ibaka and company. It didn't result in a title, but they were the closest team to beating Toronto that year. And a lot of it falls with Joel Embiid. He would be the most impactful post player for Houston since Dwight Howard. Okay, those Dwight Howard years weren't that great. He would be the most impactful post player for Houston since Yao Ming, and it would address some things Houston was basically chosen to be deficient in at this point: rebounding, post play, and rim protection. Say we swap Harden for Embiid, and we just have Embiid surrounded by four shooters at all times, or running the pick and roll with Russell Westbrook at all times. Why is that not a great option? You still have the potency of open threes if the opposition decides to do something about Embiid. The screen and roll game will be nearly impossible to stop, and you still have someone who can always create their own shot. I know Houston loves analytics, and the fact that James Harden basically just takes layups, three-pointers, or free throws, but how about the best low post player in the league and someone who gets to the line? Per 36 minutes, actually, more than James Harden does. On the Philadelphia side, I don't personally see a good reason not to do this. Your lineup will be Ben Simmons, James Harden, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, and Al Horford. Essentially what you have here is swapping out Joel Embiid, who would bring a defender into the post even if he's at the three-point line, to James Harden, whose defender could never leave him ever. And the fact that I'm sure they would stagger minutes to make sure either Ben Simmons or James Harden is on the court at all times and opening and closing together, you have two of the best creators in the game. Without Embiid, I feel Horford and Ben Simmons become even better players as well. It's essentially a win-win. Compare Harden and Embiid, and their ceiling is similar, but the fit would be much better for Philly. Well, how about the reasons to not do it? On Philly's side, James Harden is 5 years older. Embiid makes $13 million less than Harden, so they'd likely have to include another player in the trade. And Harden may not be loved in Philadelphia as much as Joel Embiid is loved in Philadelphia, which could translate into less jersey or merchandise sales, especially if the team begins to struggle. Even with that though, if I'm Philadelphia, I do this trade. Figure out either a sign and trade contract or throw in another to get James Harden on my team. And then I have two incredible creators. Ben Simmons is still an all NBA defense type of player, and James Harden is on paper the best offensive player to play the game. On Houston's side, Embiid's effort is inconsistent. When he's all in like in the 2019 playoffs, he's an absolute game changer and changes every single possession on offense and defense. In the 2020 bubble, they sent out a search party for him. He was out of shape, seemed to be pushing himself to his maximum capacity, and couldn't help the Sixers win one game in the Celtics series. And with the way Houston plays analytically, this would be such a huge shift. I mean, if we look at Embiid's analytic numbers, I'm sure they're still great in the post. He gets to the line per 36 more than Harden, and defensively he's still a great rim protector. But the fact that he really can't, or at least as of now, shouldn't shoot the three-pointer at all is a massive red flag for them, I'm sure. Going from small ball to small ball plus Joel Embiid is going to be a philosophy shift to say the least. If I'm Houston, I think I actually say no to this trade. Not because of the analytics or any of that. I'm not sold James Harden can be the best player on a title team, although he came very close in 2018 if Chris Paul doesn't get hurt. Maybe I'm totally wrong. But over and over again, Harden seems like one of the best players in the NBA in the regular season, and when the playoffs come and several other players step up, like Lillard, Doncic, Davis, Jokic, Murray, these guys all improved in the playoffs this year, and it seems like James Harden repeatedly either drops off in the playoffs or at the very least doesn't step up in the big moment. But the reason I wouldn't make the trade if I'm Houston is I don't know what Embiid I'm getting. If I know I'm getting a motivated Joel Embiid, I'd make the trade. If I think I'm getting the Embiid that eats 4 Chick-fil-A meals every meal or just seems like he's half in, half out in effort, I'd rather have James Harden on the team. If you were a GM of these teams, would you say no? What for? Let me know in the comments. And for more videos including more likely Joel Embiid trades, check out the video on the screen and be sure to subscribe for more NBA trade talk.